The mountain fog was bone-chilling at 4 in the morning when I woke to see my daughter and her husband digging in the earth beside our house. Through the window, I watched them hurriedly bury a metal box, their breath visible in the cold air. When I dug it up myself and opened it, what lay inside made me freeze. My entire world crumbling in a single heartbeat, the betrayal cut deeper than any winter wind ever could. My name is Margaret Hollis, though everyone calls me Maggie. At 68, I never imagined I'd be living alone in this wooden cabin perched on the mountainside, surrounded by nothing but pine trees and memories. 5 months ago, my husband Robert passed away after 43 years of marriage, leaving me with this house, our savings, and a loneliness that settles into my bones like the mountain cold. The night it happened, I couldn't sleep. That wasn't unusual anymore. Since Robert's death, I'd grown accustomed to the empty space beside me in bed, the silence where his gentle snoring used to be. The old cabin creaked in the wind, a sound that used to comfort me but now only emphasized how alone I was. It was 4 in the morning when I heard the first noise, not the usual settling of old wood or the wind through the pines, but something deliberate. Footsteps, muffled voices. My heart began to race as I slipped out of bed, grateful for the thick socks that muted my movements on the cold floorboards. Through the frost-etched bedroom window, I saw them. 2 figures illuminated by the weak beam of a flashlight, their breath forming clouds in the frigid air. As my eyes adjusted, recognition hit me like a physical blow. Lauren, my daughter, and beside her, Evan, her husband of 12 years. They were digging. The spot they'd chosen was significant. The small garden plot beside the house where Robert had planted wildflowers every spring for me. Now, in the dead of winter, they attacked the frozen earth with a determination that made my stomach turn. Lauren kept glancing toward the house, her face partially hidden by the hood of her winter coat, while Evan worked the shovel with practiced efficiency. I pressed closer to the window, my breath fogging the glass, in Lauren's gloved hands. I could make out a small metal box, about the size of a shoebox. She handed it to Evan, who placed it in the shallow hole they'd created. They worked quickly, efficiently, like people who had done this before or had planned it carefully. The sight of my own daughter sneaking around in the darkness, burying something on my property, sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with the mountain cold. This was the same girl I'd raised, who'd skinned her knees learning to ride a bike in our driveway, who'd cried on my shoulder after her first heartbreak. Now she moved like a stranger, a thief in the night. As they shoveled dirt back over the box, I noticed other disturbing details. They weren't using flashlights haphazardly. They kept the beams low, directed away from the windows. They'd parked their car down the access road, not in the driveway where it would be visible. Everything about their movements suggested premeditation, secrecy, guilt. Within minutes, they were done. Lauren brushed dirt from her gloves while Evan tamped down the disturbed earth with his boot. They whispered something to each other. I couldn't make out the words through the window, and then they were gone, melting back into the darkness like spirits. I remained at the window long after they'd left, staring at the spot where they'd been digging. My mind raced with questions. What was in that box? Why bury it here, on my property, in the middle of the night, and most painfully? Why hadn't my daughter simply asked me? The Lauren I knew, or thought I knew, would have come to me with any problem. We'd always been close, especially after she'd had her miscarriage 3 years ago. I'd held her while she sobbed, promised her that everything would be okay. Even after Robert's death, she'd been attentive, visiting every week, helping with groceries and doctor's appointments. Or had she? As I stood there in my darkened bedroom, I began to question everything. Those visits, always accompanied by Evan, always involving some sort of help with paperwork or organizing, the way they'd insisted on having copies of important documents, just in case. The gradual disappearance of items I'd attributed to my own absent-mindedness and grief. The realization crept over me like frost on glass. They hadn't been helping. They'd been cataloging, planning, taking. By the time the first pale light of dawn touched the mountain peaks, I'd made my decision. Whatever was in that box, whatever my daughter and her husband were planning, I would find out. The woman who had stood by Robert's bedside as cancer took him, who had buried her husband and kept going, wasn't about to be victimized by her own child. I would wait until they thought they were safe. Then I would dig up their secret and confront the ugly truth. Whatever it might be, the hardest battles, I was learning, weren't always with strangers. Sometimes they were with the people you loved most, the ones who knew exactly where to wound you. The morning sun had barely crested the mountain when I pulled on my gardening gloves and grabbed the old spade from the shed. My hands trembled, though whether from the cold or anticipation, I couldn't tell. The disturbed earth beside the house looked innocent enough in daylight, just a patch of dirt slightly darker than its surroundings. If I hadn't witnessed the midnight burial, I would never have noticed. I knelt beside Robert's wildflower garden, my knees protesting against the frozen ground. The first thrust of the spade met resistance. The earth was harder than Lauren and Evan had made it look, but I was determined. Each scoop of dirt felt like peeling back layers of deception, getting closer to a truth I both craved and dreaded. 6 inches down, the spade struck metal. My heart hammered as I brushed away the remaining soil with my gloved hands. The box was simple, unremarkable, a fireproof document container, the kind sold at any office supply store, the kind we had several of in the house. My fingers fumbled with the latch, which wasn't locked. Why would it be? They never expected me to find it. I lifted the lid. The morning light caught the diamond first, sending prismatic rainbows across my weathered hands. My 20th anniversary ring. I'd noticed it missing 2 months ago, had torn the house apart looking for it, convinced I'd misplaced it in my grief. Lauren had been so sympathetic, helping me search, suggesting maybe I'd accidentally thrown it away. Beneath the ring lay my mother's gold necklace, a delicate chain with a pearl drop that had been passed down through 3 generations. I'd planned to give it to Lauren on her 40th birthday. She'd admired it since she was a little girl, always asking to try it on when we played dress-up. But it was the papers underneath the jewelry that made my blood run cold. The original deed to the house. Robert's life insurance policy. The title to the 5 acres of lakeside property we'd bought as an investment 20 years ago. Bank statements showing accounts I didn't even know existed. And at the very bottom, folded carefully, a power of attorney document with my signature, except I'd never signed it. I sat back on my heels, the box cradled in my lap, as the full scope of the betrayal crashed over me. This wasn't impulse or desperation. This was systematic, calculated theft by the child I'd given everything to. The signature on the power of attorney was a good forgery, but not perfect. I could see where the pressure was wrong, where my characteristic loop on the G in Margaret was just slightly off. How many documents had they forged? How much had they already taken? I forced myself to examine each paper methodically, fighting the urge to scream or weep or both. The lakeside property papers included a recent assessment. The land was now worth nearly $1 million. A handwritten note in Evan's writing was clipped to it. Mom doesn't know about the mineral rights. We need to move fast. Mineral rights. I remembered Robert mentioning something about that years ago. How we'd retained them when we bought the land. It had seemed unimportant then, just another detail in a stack of paperwork. Now it might be worth a fortune. The bank statements revealed a pattern that made me sick. Regular transfers from my accounts to theirs, small enough to avoid suspicion, but adding up to thousands. They'd been bleeding me dry for months, probably longer. Each withdrawal coincided with their helpful visits, when they'd insisted on driving me to the bank to help with errands. I thought of all the times Lauren had patted my hand, told me not to worry about money, that she and Evan would take care of everything, the way she'd gently suggested I was getting forgetful, that maybe I should let them handle the finances, how she'd used my grief as a weapon against me. The jewelry was just greed, but the documents represented something worse, a complete plan to strip me of everything Robert and I had built together. They weren't just stealing objects, they were stealing my independence, my security, My future. I photographed everything with my phone, my hands steadier now that shock was transforming into cold fury. Then I carefully returned each item to the box, closed the lid, and buried it exactly as I'd found it. Let them think their secret was safe. Let them believe their feeble old mother was still in the dark. As I patted the last of the dirt back into place, I thought about the daughter I'd raised, the one who'd written me poems on Mother's Day, who'd called me her best friend. When had that girl disappeared? Or had she ever really existed? I stood, brushing dirt from my knees, and looked up at the morning sky. Robert would have known what to do, and he'd always been the practical one, the one who handled confrontation with calm logic while I preferred to keep the peace. But Robert was gone, and I was alone with this terrible knowledge. No, not alone. Not anymore. I had evidence. I had the truth. And I had something Lauren had clearly underestimated, the fury of a woman who'd lost her husband and refused to lose anything else to anyone, especially not to the daughter who'd smiled while stabbing me in the back, inside the house. I made coffee with steady hands and began to plan. They thought they were dealing with a grieving, confused old woman. They were about to learn that Margaret Hollis had plenty of fight left in her. The coffee grew cold as I sat at the kitchen table, my laptop open before me, piecing together the full extent of my daughter's betrayal. Each discovered transaction was another twist of the knife. The family computer had saved passwords, Lauren's helpful suggestions so I wouldn't forget them, and now I use that against her. $300 here, $500 there, $1,000 withdrawal marked home repairs when no repairs had been made. The pattern stretched back 8 months, beginning just 2 months after Robert's diagnosis. While I'd been focused on my dying husband, my daughter had been planning her theft. I clicked through to the investment accounts, my stomach dropping. Our mutual fund, built over decades of careful saving, had been slowly liquidated. The stocks Robert had picked so carefully, gone. Sold without my knowledge, the proceeds vanishing into accounts I couldn't access. Nearly $100,000. Disappeared like morning mist, but it was the insurance payout that sparked my rage into an inferno. Robert's life insurance, $200,000 meant to secure my future, had been deposited and immediately dispersed. $40,000 transferred to Lauren and Evan's account, another $30,000 withdrawn in cash, the rest parceled out in chunks just small enough to avoid federal reporting requirements. I remembered that day. Lauren holding my hand at the bank, tissues ready for my tears. Her voice so gentle as she guided me through signing papers, I could barely see through my grief. Don't worry about reading all this. Mom, it's just standard stuff. I've got you. My fingers curled into fists. She'd used my love for her father, my raw grief, as a tool for robbery. The memories came flooding back with new, bitter context. The weekend they'd helped clean out Robert's study. How many boxes had left with them? The jewelry they'd offered to have professionally cleaned after the funeral. My grandmother's brooch, Robert's father's pocket watch. All gone. Even small things, the silver serving set, claimed for a dinner party that never happened, the antique clock, taken to be repaired and never returned. I pulled out a legal pad and began cataloging everything, my handwriting growing sharper with each line. The thefts weren't random or desperate. This was systematic asset stripping by people who'd studied their target carefully. They knew exactly what I had and how to take it. The cruelest part was how they'd gaslit me. Every missing item had become evidence of my failing memory. You're under so much stress. Mom, grief can make people forgetful. Maybe you should see someone about your confusion. They'd planted seeds of doubt about my own competence while robbing me blind. I stood abruptly, needing to move, to channel this fury into action. In Robert's study, the one room I'd kept exactly as he'd left it, I opened the safe hidden behind his diplomas. Lauren didn't know about this one. Inside were our original documents, the real ones, including copies of everything they thought they'd stolen. My hands shook as I compared the forged power of attorney with my actual signature. Evidence. Proof of fraud. Felony forgery. My daughter wasn't just a thief, she was a criminal. The phone rang. Lauren's ringtone. I stared at it, letting it go to voicemail. Her cheerful voice filled the kitchen. "Hi, Mom, just checking in. Evan and I thought we'd come by this afternoon to help with those financial planning documents. Love you." Financial planning documents, code for whatever new theft they'd concocted. I played the message again, listening to the false warmth in her voice. How many times had I fallen for that sweetness? How often had I pushed aside my doubts because this was my baby girl, the child I'd sung to sleep, whose scraped knees I'd bandaged, the anger crystallized into something harder, colder. This wasn't my daughter anymore. This was a predator who happened to share my DNA, who used familial love as a weapon, and predators needed to be stopped. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts, stopping at a name I hadn't expected to need, Patricia Stern, the prosecutor who'd handled a fraud case for our church years ago. We'd stayed friendly, exchanging Christmas cards and occasional coffee. She'd know what to do, but first, I needed to protect what was left. I called the bank, my voice steady and clear, password changes, account freezes, new protections that would lock Lauren out completely. The lakeside property would be transferred to a trust immediately. The mineral rights secured. Each action felt like donning armor, preparing for battle. Lauren thought she was stealing from a weak, grieving widow. She was about to discover she'd awakened something far more dangerous, a mother's rage transformed into cold, calculated justice. I looked at Robert's photo on the mantel, his kind eyes seeming to give me strength. "She's not our little girl anymore," I whispered to him. "But I promise you, she won't get away with this. Not one more penny, not one more lie." The morning sun climbed higher, warming the kitchen, but inside me, winter had settled in to stay. My daughter had killed something precious, the unconditional trust between mother and child. Now she would learn that Margaret Hollis had survived worse than betrayal. I had survived loss. I would survive this too. But Lauren? She was about to lose everything. The doorbell rang at 2:30 that afternoon, right on schedule. I'd spent the hours since my discovery preparing, arranging the evidence on the dining room table like pieces on a chessboard. The original documents from the safe, the photographs from my phone, printed in damning clarity, bank statements with transfers highlighted in yellow, the forged power of attorney centered like an accusation. "Mom?" Lauren's voice called through the door, sweet as poisoned honey. "It's us." I opened the door to find my daughter smiling, Evan beside her carrying a folder thick with what I assumed were more documents for me to sign. Lauren stepped forward to hug me, and it took everything I had not to recoil from her touch. "You look tired, Mom," she said, studying my face with false concern. "Have you been sleeping?" "Not well," I replied truthfully, leading them to the dining room, "but I've been keeping busy." They followed me, chattering about traffic and weather, not noticing the change in my demeanor, not until they saw the table. Lauren froze mid-sentence, the color draining from her face. Evan's folder slipped from his fingers, papers scattering across the floor. Neither of them moved to pick them up. "Sit down," I said, my voice calm as winter ice. "Mom, I don't understand," Lauren began, but I cut her off. "Sit down." They sat, Lauren's eyes darting between the documents like a trapped animal seeking escape. Evan's jaw worked silently, his face flushing red. I remained standing, my hands flat on the table. 20,000 from the checking account, 30,000 from savings, 100,000 from the investments, 200,000 from the life insurance, my mother's necklace, my anniversary ring, the house deed, the lake property documents. I listed each theft methodically, watching Lauren shrink with every word. Did I miss anything? "Mom, you don't understand," Lauren's voice cracked. "We were trying to protect you. You've been so confused lately." "Stop." The word cracked like a whip. "I found the box, the one you buried at 4 this morning in Robert's garden." Evan's face went from red to white. Lauren's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "We can explain," Evan started, but I laughed, a harsh sound that made them both flinch. "Explain. Explain how you forged my signature, how you stole from me while I was mourning my husband, how you used my grief as an opportunity." I picked up the forged document. "This is a felony. Evan, you're an accountant. You know that." "You can't prove anything," he said, trying for defiance but achieving only desperation. "Can I?" I gestured to the evidence. "Bank records, security footage from the bank showing you both with me during the unauthorized transfers, the originals of every document you thought you'd stolen. And this morning, I had a very interesting conversation with Patricia Stern. You remember her? The prosecutor?" Lauren started to cry. Not the gentle tears of remorse, but the angry sobs of someone caught. "You don't know what it's been like for us. The economy, the bills. Evan's business is failing. We're about to lose our house. So you decided to take mine? It's not like that." She slammed her hand on the table. "Do you know how much money you and Dad were sitting on while we struggled? That lake property alone could solve all our problems. You don't even use it." There it was. The entitlement, the belief that my lifetime of work and saving was somehow theirs by right. "Your father and I worked 40 years for what we have," I said quietly. "We saved, we sacrificed, we invested wisely. That was for our retirement, our security, and you felt entitled to steal it because you're struggling." "We're your family," Lauren shouted. "Your only child. Doesn't that mean anything?" "It meant everything," I said, and for the first time, my voice broke. "You were my world, Lauren. I would have helped you if you'd asked, would have given you anything within reason. But you didn't ask. You lied. You made me doubt my own mind." Evan stood abruptly. "We're leaving. You can't keep us here." "No, I can't," I agreed. "But the police can, and they will. If I see either of you on my property again." "You wouldn't," Lauren whispered. "You wouldn't send your own daughter to jail." I met her eyes, letting her see the stranger she'd created. The daughter I raised wouldn't have stolen from her grieving mother, wouldn't have buried evidence in her dead father's garden. That daughter is gone. You're just someone who looks like her. "Mom, please, get out." I walked to the door and opened it. "You have 1 week to return everything you stole, every penny, every piece of jewelry, everything, 1 week, or I file charges, and if you think I'm bluffing, try me." They left in silence. Lauren sobbing. Evan white-faced and stumbling. I watched them drive away, then closed the door and leaned against it, suddenly exhausted. The house felt different now, emptier, but also cleaner, as if their betrayal had been a poison finally drained. I looked at Robert's photo again, wondering what he would think of what I'd done. I gave her a chance. I told him, one more than she gave me. Whether they would take it remained to be seen. But Margaret Hollis was done being a victim. Whatever came next, I would face it with my eyes wide open and my heart guarded. The war for my independence had begun. 3 days passed in tense silence. No calls from Lauren, no surprise visits. I'd half expected them to test my resolve, but perhaps they were smarter than that. Or perhaps they were planning something worse. On the 4th morning, a knock at my door interrupted my coffee. Not the doorbell, a gentle knock, almost hesitant, through the peephole. I saw a woman I recognized but couldn't quite place. Silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun, probably in her early 70s, wearing a wool coat against the mountain chill. "Olivia Monroe," she said when I opened the door. "From down the road? We met at the Riverside Church potluck last spring." I remembered now. She'd been new to the area, had complimented my potato salad. "Of course. Please, come in." She settled at my kitchen table with the ease of someone accustomed to making herself at home. I poured her coffee without asking. Mountain hospitality demanded it, and waited. "I hope you don't mind my dropping by," she began, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "But I saw your daughter and her husband the other day, the way they peeled out of your driveway, the look on her face. Well, it reminded me of something I went through 5 years ago." I studied her face, seeing understanding there. "Oh? My daughter, Patricia, not Patty or Pat. She insisted on Patricia." Olivia smiled sadly. She was always particular about things being just so, including my finances, as it turned out. The similarity hit too close to home. What happened? Started small. She needed help with her mortgage one month, then her car broke down. Always a crisis. Always urgent. Olivia sipped her coffee thoughtfully. I didn't mind helping. What mother does, but then I started noticing things missing. My late husband's coin collection, jewelry that had gone for cleaning. Sound familiar? My throat tightened. Too familiar. The worst part was how she made me feel crazy for questioning it, told her brothers I was losing my mind, tried to get power of attorney by convincing everyone I had dementia. Her voice hardened. I was only 65 and sharp as a tack, but she had them half convinced. How did you stop her? Same way you're doing, I imagine, with evidence and backbone. Olivia leaned forward. But I made mistakes. Maggie? May I call you Maggie? I tried to handle it all alone, too proud to ask for help, too ashamed that my own child would do such things. I nodded, understanding completely. The shame was almost as painful as the betrayal. Patricia got desperate when I cut her off, broke into my house while I was at church, claimed she was checking on me, but she was really looking for things to steal. Olivia's eyes met mine steadily. That's when I learned the value of good neighbors and security cameras. Did you press charges? I had to. She left me no choice. The older woman's voice carried old pain. 3 years probation, court-ordered restitution. We don't speak anymore. Her choice, not mine, but Maggie. I sleep soundly now, knowing my home is safe, my remaining years secure. We sat in companionable silence for a moment. Then Olivia reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. Rebecca Carver. I read aloud. Best elder law attorney in the state. Specializes in financial abuse cases. She handled mine. Olivia patted my hand. Don't wait, dear. The longer you give them, the more they'll take. And document everything, every conversation, every threat, every tear. Lauren has a week to return what she stole, I said. Olivia's laugh was knowing. She won't. They never do. They'll try manipulation first, then anger. Maybe even bring in other family members to guilt you. But you hold firm. I don't have other family. It was just Robert, Lauren, and me. Then she'll try something else. These types always do. Olivia stood, smoothing her coat. I live in the Blue Victorian a half-mile down. Anytime, day or night, if you need someone who understands. And I mean that. After she left, I sat with the business card, thinking about her words. Patricia and Lauren, 2 daughters who'd seen their mothers not as people to love, but resources to plunder. How many more were out there? I called Rebecca Carver that afternoon. Her voice was brisk, professional, but warmed when I mentioned Olivia. Olivia Monroe is a force of nature, she said. Refuse to be victimized. I hope you have the same steel in you, Mrs. Hollis. I'm finding it, I admitted. Good. Now, tell me everything. For the next hour, I laid out the whole sordid story, the midnight burial, the systematic theft, the forged documents. Rebecca listened without interrupting, occasionally making affirming noises. You have a strong case, she said when I finished. The forgery alone is serious. Add the elder financial abuse charges, and your daughter could face significant jail time. The words hit hard. Jail. My baby girl in jail. I know it's difficult, Rebecca said gently, reading my silence. But remember, she made these choices. You're just holding her accountable. We scheduled an in-person meeting for the next day. As I hung up, I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. I wasn't alone in this fight anymore. Olivia had survived it. Rebecca would guide me through it. Lauren had counted on my isolation, my grief, my maternal instinct to protect her even from her own crimes. She hadn't counted on the strength that comes from connecting with others who understand, who've walked this painful path and emerged whole. I picked up Robert's photo from the mantel. I found my army. I told him. Small, but mighty. The week was ticking away. Soon, Lauren would have to choose, return what she'd stolen or face the consequences. Either way, I was ready. Margaret Hollis was no longer fighting alone. Rebecca Carver's office occupied the top floor of a restored Victorian in downtown, all dark wood and leather-bound books. She herself was nothing like the stuffy lawyer I'd imagined, mid-50s with kind eyes behind designer glasses and a handshake that meant business. "First things first," she said, spreading my documents across her mahogany desk. "This forged power of attorney is a gift. Clear evidence of intent to defraud." I watched her examine each paper with practiced eyes, occasionally making notes on a legal pad, the pattern of withdrawals, the timing after your husband's death, textbook elder financial abuse. The buried evidence shows consciousness of guilt. Your daughter knew what she was doing was wrong. "The lake property," I said. She mentioned mineral rights. Rebecca's eyes sharpened. "Pull the original deed." I handed it over, watching her scan the fine print. Her low whistle made my stomach flip. "You retained mineral rights. Smart move 20 years ago." She turned to her computer, fingers flying across the keyboard. "There's been natural gas exploration in that area. Several companies have been buying up rights. Your 5 acres could be worth—" She turned the monitor toward me. The number made me dizzy. $2.3 million for the mineral rights alone, Rebecca said. "The land itself is worth another $1 million. No wonder they were desperate to get those documents. $3.3 million. Robert and I had lived modestly, saved carefully, never imagining we were sitting on such wealth. And Lauren had tried to steal it all. This changes things," Rebecca continued. "This isn't just theft anymore. This is attempted grand larceny. Federal charges possible." I thought of Lauren's tears, her claims of desperation. She said they were losing their house. Rebecca pulled up another screen. "Public records are wonderful things. Your daughter and son-in-law own their house outright. Purchased 5 years ago, paid in full. They also own 2 rental properties and a vacation cabin in Aspen." The room spun slightly. "That's impossible. She said Evan's business was failing. His accounting firm had its best year on record. They're not poor. Mrs. Hollis, they're greedy." Each revelation was another nail in the coffin of my maternal delusions. There had been no desperation, no need. Just pure, calculated greed. "I'll need access to all your accounts to trace the full extent of the theft," Rebecca said. "Also, I want to file a restraining order immediately. They've shown they'll come to your property at night. That escalation concerns me." Over the next 2 hours, we built my case methodically. Rebecca had seen too many situations like mine turn violent when the perpetrators realized they were cornered. She insisted on security cameras for my property, a new alarm system, and regular check-ins with Olivia. "Your neighbor was right to warn you about escalation," she said. "When the week deadline passes without compliance, they'll get desperate. We need to be ready." She assigned her investigator to dig deeper into Lauren and Evan's finances. "I want to know every asset they have. If they don't return what they stole, we'll freeze everything they own." As I signed the representation papers, Rebecca's expression softened. "I know this is hard. She's your daughter. But remember, you didn't break this relationship. She did. The moment she decided to rob you." I left her office with a strange mix of empowerment and sadness. The investigation was officially underway. There was no turning back now. That evening, Olivia came by with homemade soup and her laptop. "Time to modernize your security," she announced, pulling up websites for camera systems. "The best defense is good offense." We spent hours planning camera placements, motion sensors, upgraded locks. Olivia shared stories of her own journey, the late-night break-in attempts, the smear campaign Patricia had launched against her, the family members who'd chosen sides. "The hardest part," she said, "was accepting that the daughter I loved existed only in my memories. The woman who tried to destroy me was a stranger wearing her face." I understood completely. Every memory of Lauren now came with an asterisk. Her smile at my birthday dinner, was she already planning her thefts? Her tears at Robert's funeral, genuine grief or anticipation of inheritance? The foundation of our relationship had been dynamited, leaving only rubble. My phone buzzed. Lauren's number. I let it go to voicemail, then played it on speaker for Olivia to hear. "Mom, please, this is insane. Lawyers? Really? We're family. We can work this out without destroying everything. Call me back, please. Olivia snorted. Classic. Now you're the one destroying everything, not the person who stole from you. The week was nearly up. 3 more days for Lauren to return what she'd taken. Rebecca had prepared papers to file the moment the deadline passed. The security system would be installed tomorrow. Everything was in motion. That night, I sat in Robert's study, surrounded by our financial documents, seeing our life's work with new eyes. Every investment, every saved penny represented choice and sacrifice. We'd driven used cars so we could invest, skipped vacations to build our nest egg, and we'd done it not just for ourselves, but hoping to leave something for Lauren. Now I understood the bitter irony. We'd saved so well that we'd become targets. Our prudence had funded their greed. But no more. Margaret Hollis was done being prey. With Rebecca's legal expertise and Olivia's hard-won wisdom, I was building a fortress around what remained. Lauren had stolen my trust, my peace, my relationship with her. She would not steal my future. The deadline passed without a word from Lauren. On day 8, they arrived. I was ready. The new security system captured everything, their black Mercedes pulling up, Lauren in a business suit I'd never seen her wear, Evan carrying a briefcase like armor. They didn't know about the cameras yet. Didn't know Rebecca was on speed dial. Didn't know Olivia was watching from her car down the road. I let them ring twice before answering, keeping the chain lock engaged. The week is up, I said through the gap. Mom, please, let us in. We have a proposal. Lauren's voice was different, harder. The mask of the devoted daughter had finally slipped. Against my better judgment, I let them in, but I kept my phone in my hand, Rebecca's number ready. They sat at the same dining room table where I'd confronted them, but this time they came prepared. Evan opened his briefcase with theatrical precision, pulling out documents. We've consulted with our attorney, he began, as if this were a business meeting. Given the situation, we're prepared to make you an offer. An offer? I almost laughed. You stole from me and now you want to negotiate? Lauren leaned forward, her smile sharp as glass. Let's be realistic. Mother, you're 78 years old. 68, I corrected coldly. She waved dismissively. Whatever, the point is, you don't need all those assets. We're offering to manage them for you. We'll give you a generous monthly allowance, handle all the complex financial decisions. You can live here comfortably without worrying about anything. The audacity took my breath away. They were trying to legitimize their theft, to make me a prisoner in my own life. Look at this logically. Evan spread out papers covered in numbers. The lake property alone requires management. The mineral rights negotiations are complex. At your age, wouldn't it be easier to let us handle everything? My age? I stood slowly. You mean the age where I'm still sharp enough to catch you stealing? Still capable enough to hire attorneys? Still strong enough to fight back? This is exactly what we're talking about. Lauren's mask cracked further. This paranoia, this aggression, Dad's death has clearly affected your mental state. We're trying to help you. There it was. The gaslighting. The attempt to rewrite reality. But I was ready. Rebecca, I said clearly to my phone, are you getting all this? Lauren's face went white as I put the phone on speaker. Rebecca's voice filled the room, crisp and professional. Every word, Mrs., Hollis, Mr. and Mrs. Daniels. I'm Rebecca Carver, representing Margaret Hollis. What you're proposing sounds dangerously close to extortion and continued elder abuse. I suggest you leave immediately. Evan's briefcase snapped shut. This is a family matter. No, Rebecca interrupted. This is a criminal matter. You have one final opportunity to return all stolen assets within 24 hours. After that, we file charges, federal charges, given the interstate nature of some transactions and the amount stolen. Lauren stood so fast her chair toppled backward. You hateful old woman, she snarled. All pretense gone. After everything I've done for you, visiting every week, pretending to care about your boring stories, acting like I gave a damn about Dad's death when all he left us was crumbs while sitting on millions. Each word was a revelation. Every visit, every gesture of love, all calculated, all false. He left you nothing because he knew exactly what you were, I said quietly. He saw through you long before I did, those last weeks. He made me promise to be careful, to watch out for myself. I thought he was delirious. He wasn't. Get out, I pointed to the door. 24 hours, return everything or face the consequences. Evan grabbed Lauren's arm, pulling her toward the door, but she wrenched free, advancing on me with such fury that I stepped back. You want war? Fine. We'll contest every document. We'll have you declared incompetent. I'll tell everyone how you've lost your mind with grief. By the time we're done, you'll be in a nursing home, and everything will be ours anyway. Mrs. Daniels. Rebecca's voice cut through the threat. You've just added assault, terroristic threats, and conspiracy to your charges. I recommend you leave before Mrs. Monroe and I call the police. Yes, we have witnesses. They left then. Evan dragging Lauren, who was screaming threats that the cameras captured in crystal clarity. I stood in my doorway watching them go, feeling strangely calm. The mask was finally, completely off. The daughter I'd mourned was confirmed to never have existed. Olivia appeared at my side, having entered through the back door at Rebecca's signal. You did well, she said softly. The hardest part is over. But I knew better. The hardest part, accepting that my daughter was my enemy, had just begun. Tomorrow, Rebecca would file charges. Tomorrow, the legal war would start. But tonight, I had clarity. She said Robert saw through her. I murmured. Parents always know. Olivia replied. We just don't always admit it. I thought of Robert's final days, his urgent whispers about being careful, protecting myself. He'd tried to warn me. Even as cancer stole his voice, his last gift wasn't the money or the property. It was the truth about our daughter. And finally, I was strong enough to face it. The morning sun painted the lake in shades of gold and amber as I stood on my deck. Legal papers in hand, 6 months had passed since that confrontation. 6 months of legal battles, depositions, and discoveries that revealed the true extent of Lauren and Evan's deception. They'd fought hard, just as Lauren had threatened, attempted to have me declared incompetent, spread rumors in town about my declining mental state, even hired a private investigator to find dirt on Rebecca and Olivia. But the evidence was insurmountable. The forged documents, the security footage, the paper trail of their fraud stretching back years. In the end, they'd had no choice but to accept the plea deal Rebecca negotiated. Restitution of everything stolen, 3 years probation for Lauren, 5 for Evan due to the forgery. No jail time. Rebecca said I'd gone soft, but I couldn't bear the thought of my daughter behind bars. No matter what she'd done, the mineral rights deal had closed last week, $2.3 million, just as Rebecca had predicted. I donated half to a local charity supporting elder abuse victims. The irony wasn't lost on me. My daughter's greed would now help protect others from daughters like her. You're up early. Olivia's voice came from behind me. She'd taken to morning visits, bringing coffee and companionship. We were 2 women who'd survived the same storm, finding solace in shared understanding. Couldn't sleep, I admitted. Today would have been Robert's 70th birthday. She stood beside me. Silent support. We watched an eagle circle over the lake, riding thermals with effortless grace. Any word from her? Olivia asked gently. No. The restraining order is still in effect. I sipped my coffee, tasting the bitter sweetness. Her attorney sent the last restitution check yesterday. It's over. But it wasn't, not really. The financial theft had ended, but the emotional wound would never fully heal. I'd lost my daughter twice, once to her greed, and again to the truth of who she'd always been. I keep wondering, I said, if I failed her somehow, if Robert and I were too careful with money, made her feel deprived, if we created this. Olivia's hand found mine. Some people are just broken. Maggie, not everything is nurture. Sometimes nature deals a bad hand. I thought of the letters I'd found while cleaning out Robert's study, notes he'd written but never sent, expressing concern about Lauren's troubling lack of empathy, her manipulative tendencies. He'd seen it, protected me from it as long as he could, even in death. He'd tried to shield me with warnings I'd been too grief-stricken to understand. My phone buzzed, Rebecca checking in as she did every few days. The message was simple: remember, you won. Had I? I'd kept my home, my savings, my dignity. I'd found unexpected friendship with Olivia, strength I didn't know I possessed. But I'd lost my family. My only child was now a stranger, forbidden to come within 500 feet of me. You survived, Olivia said, reading my thoughts. That's victory enough. The eagle swooped low over the water, catching something in its talons before soaring skyward again. Nature at its most honest, hunter and hunted, survival and loss. I folded the legal papers, tucking them away. They represented the end of one chapter, but I was still writing the next. At 68, I was learning to live without the illusion of the daughter I'd thought I had, learning to find joy in morning coffee with a friend, in the sunrise over the lake, in the freedom that comes from facing hard truths. Robert, I whispered to the morning air, I kept my promise. I protected myself. The lake property would remain mine until I chose otherwise. The mineral rights would fund a comfortable future and leave a legacy to causes that mattered. Lauren and Evan would rebuild their lives without my resources to plunder. Justice, imperfect but real, had been served. I turned from the view, linking arms with Olivia. Breakfast, I suggested. I'm thinking pancakes. With bacon, she agreed. Lots of bacon. As we walked inside, I glanced back once at the lake, somewhere out there. My daughter was living her life, facing her consequences. I hoped she'd learn from them, though I doubted it. People who could bury their crimes in their father's garden while their mother slept rarely changed. But I had changed. Margaret Hollis was no longer a victim, no longer naive about the darkness that could hide behind a familiar smile. I was a survivor, scarred but standing, betrayed but not broken. And that was enough. Thank you for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Has anything like this happened to you or someone you know? Your experiences matter, and sharing them helps us all stay vigilant and protected.